They should be intelligent, sophisticated.
Lot of fun, because I think I'm a lot of fun.
Stylish.
Got to teach me new things, broaden my horizons.
They've got to be loaded.
To obey my commands.
They should be genuine, dependable.
With a good business background.
New Compaq Presario, your perfect partner.
Will my boyfriend see this?
Where can we get together then?
Hello and welcome to Retech, and today we're going to talk about a PC, a desktop PC, a compact and compact PC. It's the Presario 425. Now, anyone who really doesn't know the history of Compaq itself, there's been quite a few good documentaries out there, but I'll run through a little bit here. Basically, Compaq was one of the most kind of prolific and almost the most famous producers of PCs, possibly after IBM at the time, and basically they were virtual clones of the IBM PC, really. They did a lot of innovation and they did a lot of different styles of desktops, and really they were seen as the kind of go-to machine at the time. Now, there were a lot of other manufacturers out there who produced PCs for the likes of Dell, and there was also Gateway later on, and there was also AST and many others, but Compaq's the one that kind of sticks in a lot of people's memories, and for good reason, really, because they were genuinely and generally very well built machines. The biggest drawback of a lot of the Compaq machines is they were slightly behind the times, just very slightly behind the curve, but really for business use, student use, home use, it didn't make a massive difference, really, to be honest. And you know, they were one of the more reliable and one of the more kind of well known, and also one of the companies that would honor a lot of their, you know, warranties throughout its life. They wouldn't back away from it, and they were very good at it, but again, they were a little bit behind the curve, and this is one of those machines. Now, at the time, this machine here was seen as a, what on earth would you want to buy that for, because it was basically a CRT monitor with a PC built in underneath on a tray. And it wasn't a bad thing. Nowadays, you'd love something like this, flat screen monitor with a tiny base at the bottom where your PC lives. And this is seen to be the norm for a lot of machines nowadays. But well, this is a CRT machine. It's very heavy. It's for its time, when it came out in 1993, it was a little bit behind the curve in terms of power. It was a 486 base machines, and it was running at basically 25 megahertz. So it's 486, 25, and it wasn't a bad machine. It was possibly only just able to run the Windows 95 that came out only a few years later. So this machine was still around in its 33 guise when Windows 95 launched. Now, in saying that though, if you wanted a compact machine, literally, and you wanted one that doesn't take up a lot of desk space, had a very or reasonably small footprint, because remember, it is a CRT machine, so it is quite deep, and you wanted something that was reliable, then this was probably one of the models to go for, or should have been. But people shunned away from it because they were used to the beige box, the tower PC, the desktop or under the desktop tower unit or base unit, and this didn't fare too well. It sold quite reasonably well, but it didn't fare well in the press, and it didn't fare that well in the wild out to the public. One of the biggest reasons was because if you kind of cast your mind back to the launch of Windows 95. It was predominantly CD based. I mean, you could get a disc version, but it was an absolute pain to install a disc version of Windows 95. But you could go out and buy an external CD-ROM, which would actually improve matters, but there was no room inside of the housing to put a CD-ROM drive in, and that, I guess, put a lot of customers off, because this machine came out at the time of the burgeoning CD market for PCs, so it was kind of a little bit behind, as we said. But in saying that, it wasn't an all too bad machine. 4 meg of memory, upgradable. It had a 200 meg hard drive, which was all right for the time. You know, it wasn't overly big. You know, at the time it was kind of around the norm for entry-ish level computers to have that kind of capacity. And it had an option of a coprocessor, but it did a lot of its coprocessing in software, so it was not too shabby in terms of performance. But the lack of a CD-ROM drive was the one that actually probably sounded the death knell for this machine, because without that you couldn't access any of the modern, in brackets, in quotes, multimedia software that was coming out. But, you know, that didn't necessarily kill the machine, because for business and educational use, this was quite a good thing. And Compaq, in their documentation, said that this is one of the easiest machines to set up. You could basically take it out of the box and have it set up within 18 minutes. Well, I'm guessing that was a bit long, really. I mean, literally, there's a keyboard and a mouse cable and a power cable, and that's really it. Oh, and a modem cable if you wanted to connect it to your phone line, and everything else was ready to go. And that wasn't a bad thing for this machine. So let's take a quick look at this machine first. It's a fairly early machine. It's yellow in places. The keyboard's very yellow. The mouse is kind of yellow, but not as bad. But it's one of those machines I'm not really going to restore, because it's just an original machine, and that's how I tend to think they should stay sometimes. The keyboard is very tactile. It's got quite a nice action to it, even after all of these years. But it's not the best. It's not a quality key switch keyboard. It's just a dome keyboard, and that kind of belies its price. I mean, the price of this machine was $1,200, around $2,000 today if you bought this in the US, and that's quite a chunk today for a PC, but it's not at the time, when you kind of think that this was an entry-level machine pitched at educational and home and hobbyist use. Really, a lot of them wound up in businesses, as I said, because it was an ideal unit to throw on a desk. It didn't need much management. But, you know, it's got a nice screen. The screen's actually very clear. It's very sharp. It's a quality item, really, and that's quite surprising for its price range. It has a floppy drive, but no CD-ROM, as we mentioned, and it's an all-in-one form factor. And it's something that, you know, if you had it at the time and you bought, you'd be relatively happy with it. It could run most of the software of the time. It was kind of above minimum spec, but just below what people would class as recommended specification, so it would do it. With a little bit of extra memory, it would have been a lot better as well. Now, as I said, it's very heavy, so as we turn this machine around, you can see there's not really a lot to it. It's quite a deep machine. It's a little bit deeper, I'd say, than a monitor of the same size, but again, that's because it has a PC in the bottom of it. Okay, so if we spin the machine around again, so looking at the back of this machine, we have keyboard and mouse, PS2, and then we have microphone options, serial and parallel on the back of it, and the entire PC is built in this tray, and this tray pulls out just with these little handles here. So basically the entire tray will pull out once these screws are undone, and that keeps everything nice and neat, although there's not a massive amount of upgrading to do. But it was a nice, neat solution, because if you remember how big and how chunky tower systems were at the time, this really isn't a bad compromise. Okay, so we're going to turn this machine on, and basically on the front, as I said, there's not a lot to go on. There's just a single power button, and the first thing you can hear is the hard drive starting up, and it's not massively loud. You could probably hear it rumbling through the mic more than it really is, but it's not too bad. It's not a bad machine. It's quite quiet, and they've got 4096k of memory on board on this machine now. Now the mouse itself, as you can see, is quite responsive. It's all right for a mouse that's, you know, decades old really. And it's just a ball mouse. There's nothing really special about this mouse at all. And when it starts up, you can see the screen's quite clear. It's quite nice to look at. It doesn't flicker too much, even looking at it at the moment. And you have your standard Excel, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Access, Office. And these are the kind of suite that came with this machine, okay? And there's nothing different or untoward about this machine. It's all set up nicely. So we're going to Compaq Utilities, okay? So if we open this window up, you basically get the usual power management software on it. Turn the monitor off or the hard drive off after so many minutes and so on. It's just a very early version of Windows, and it's you know, most people have used this before. So really, when you look at this machine, it's just a basic 486-25, and it's quite a good one. It's lasted this amount of time, and it's quite a decent machine. There's not really anything different to what you would use on Windows 3.1, 3.11, and it works really, really well. The good thing about it is it's survived all of this time, although it is starting to get a little noisy, so I'll probably have to rebuild this machine at some point and do a quick restore on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to power it off, because it is quite noisy when we're trying to kind of talk with all of this hard drive spinning uppery stuff, and also the fans kicking in. Okay, so the overview of the Presario 425. My kind of overview of this machine is that it hit a market that really didn't exist. So there was no real need for this design, because people were used to the tower PC, the desktop PC was room for expansion. This limited your expansion capability, and it also limited what effectively you could do with the machine because of it. It came out at slightly the wrong time, because it was the time of the multimedia explosion, and it kind of didn't fit with that. It was a basic desktop PC, and because of this is why I think it kind of, the sales dropped off because of it. It didn't get the foothold it should have done if it had a built-in CD drive and a built-in multimedia expansion capability. I mean, there was definitely room inside the machine. There was a lot of room to put those options in it, but Compaq decided that, you know, this was the base model entry-level machine and it wasn't needed. But other than that, it's a good machine. It runs well, it starts up, it does everything it needs to do. It runs Windows quite smoothly, and it isn't a bad machine overall. For a kind of collector's point of view, it's a piece of history. It's a historic machine now, and Compaq no longer exists. It's the way we've come today. It's a pointer rather to the way we've come today, because we are used to all-in-one machines that do everything. I mean, really, we don't really have CD drives in modern machines anyway, and floppy drives. So if you took away those two items, you'd have what was really roughly the precursor to what we kind of know today as a PC. But it wasn't really ahead of its time. It was behind the curve, but paradoxically it became slightly ahead of its time. It's just one of those things. It's worth collecting. There's not a massive amount you can do with it because it's not built for gaming. It will run some of the games of the era, but it won't run the more kind of processor intensive or memory intensive ones, because it would struggle. But if you wanted a machine just to play around with Windows 3.1, or maybe use the dial-up modem if you can find a bulletin board running for this as well, well, it could be a little bit of fun. But this is your machine. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join us for more reviews of these classic and vintage machines. I quite enjoyed having a look at an old PC, and it's been nice to do something slightly different. So yeah, there might be more of this kind of thing to come. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and if you feel like you want to, just jump onto Patreon and support this channel. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.